Welcome everyone to another Easy Ray video. Today we're going to talk about coming to America. Coming to America is a powerful love story as Eddie Murphy's most endearing character to date. We see a love story and it's truly makes us reflect on just love itself. Do you think your partner would value you if you lost everything? Would they see the beauty within you? Would you see the beauty within them? Would you still find that connection? They're challenging questions. Of course, maybe some of us would naturally say, yes, of course, it wouldn't be a problem. But actually living through the struggle, having to suffer and go through those pains, it's easier said than done. The way we're going to break this film down is that we're going to talk briefly about a brief summary of the film without any spoilers. And then we're going to talk about the immigrant story. Then we're going to talk about money since it plays a role in the film and, of course, the world as we know it today. And then after that, we're going to talk about how our lead character interacts with other people. And then in conclusion, I thought this film was a perfect opportunity to talk about the 9 different types of love according to the Greeks. To America is about a man played by Eddie Murphy seeking a challenge. And he's on a quest to find his partner. And he goes on a quest and goes to America. And essentially, this film isn't just a love story. It's also an immigrant story. It's also an immigrant love story. And we see the different things that some of the characters have to overcome, such as starting all over again from the beginning. Because for most immigrants, when you start in a new country, you usually have to start from the bottom. Sometimes you have the opportunity to network and to stay within your relatively field, but it's easier said than done. There's a big, long tightrope to have to climb up to the top. And the film does a good job of depicting the struggle of the immigrant and just the way they're casted and the way they're seen and the way that we unfortunately judge people. And this takes us to our next section, which comes to money. Because whether we like it or not, money plays a big role on how we see people. It also forces us to classify people in categories, whether we want to or not, because of the effects of money, right? You have people that are homeless, people that are poor, people that are lower class, middle class, upper middle class, wealthy. And this film even talks about the elite, which has to do with, kingdoms and people that have multi-generational wealth. So we have those layers that play a role in this too. And it kind of forces you to kind of examine people in a different way and have certain stereotypes, whether they're intersectional or they're racial or they're ethnic. All these different things play a role. And money, unfortunately, becomes this part of the process and how we see things. And money plays a role when it comes to the immigrant process. It actually plays a role with how beneficial your process is going to be. Money plays a role on how fruitful your immigration experience is going to be. If you have more money, of course, your experience is going to be much better compared to those that don't, that have to scratch and claw their way to get any small win. True Yo talks about how history is a fluid process and how it changes depending on how different things are depicted. And these also play a role when it comes to stereotypes. Because the more we learn, the more we know about people, the more we realize how we have to humanize different perspectives. And it also applies to immigrants as well. Professor Brominder Coward talks about how memories kind of shape who we are as our identity. And it kind of plays a role when it comes to coping and forgetting. And she has various research versus various different diasporas. And this whole process of memory and forgetting and trauma and all these different layers kind of play a role on how things affect us. And as an immigrant, right? Sometimes we go through different migrant traumas. And some people, like in this film, they don't go through all migrant traumas. Some characters do more than others. And you start to reflect how those things affect them, right? And you have the relationship between emigrate and immigrate, Emigrate has to do with you leaving your country, and immigrate has to do with your transition as you arrive in the country. And although this character is only here for a short amount of time, we're not really too sure how long he's there in the United States, in Queens, New York, but we can estimate could be approximately a couple weeks to a month, based on the different events that we see taking place. So we could say estimate about a month that he's there. So we see his different experience and all the various characters that get affected, and all the things that they kind of long for, and the things that they mourn for and they miss. Even if it's done in a comedic way, it's still a mourning. It's still some kind of loss. Luckily, the immigrants in this film do speak English, so they don't have to like worry about losing their sense of self and identity and have to adapt to a new language in a new place. So they have some benefits in regards to that. And now that we're done talking about money, that's going to transition to our next point. We're going to talk about our next point with how our main character interacts with other characters and other people around the world. So he has a very communal feel and a very interactive feel. A lot of those ideas are very similar to the Ubuntu philosophy system. The Ubuntu philosophy is rooted in Malawi, Zimbabwe, and South Africa, and it has the belief as I am who I am because of who we are. So it's very communal, it's very societal. And you can see how the way Eddie Murphy's character interacts with everybody, that he's worrying about the greater good, he's worried about the society, he's worried about the community. He's not so focused on the individual. And a lot of these ideas are also similar to a Confucian ideal of Guanxi. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. And it's a similar principle of like having that whole idea of the community and the way that you can see yourself in others, that other people are a reflection of who you are. They're a mirror of who you are. It's this idea of social harmony. And so it's beautiful to analyze that as we see this character interact with everybody and kind of seeing what he wants to value. And we see what he values in other people and what ultimately plays a role and who he ends up valuing and who he ends up deciding to be his partner. One of the quotes that he says in the film, which shows his introspectiveness, his willingness to grow, is he quotes famous philosopher Nietzsche, Friedrich Nietzsche. He says, "He who would not learn to fly one day must first learn to walk and run and climb and dance. One cannot fly into flying." Like you can't just like jump into things if you're trying to have these big goals. There's this plans, there's these steps that you have to take. And he's willing and he knows that he's not just going to find the love of his life. He knows that he has to do his part, get a feel for the community and put himself out there and to put himself in the right type of people where he can find the right type of partner. And yeah, it's an important aspect when it comes to the quest of love. Where you look and where you find your partner plays a role on the type of person you end up with. Of course, that plays a role, right? Ideally, somebody who's also trying to grow themselves and better themselves in some type of way. That takes us into our final point, which is the 9 types of love of Greek mythology. And the reason why I wanted to talk about this is because I think it's important because we see our main character interact with different people throughout the film, and I think it does a good job of practicing this type of idea of different types of love. And whether you realize it or not, you've practiced these different forms of love. We just probably haven't like given a term to them. So hopefully this becomes a helpful exercise for you and you guys get some value from this. The first example we're going to talk about is eros. And eros is sexual desire. It comes from the root word of erotica or erotic. So it's pretty traditional when you think of eros. It's kind of like, when you're physically attracted to somebody. The next one is philia. Philia is another form of love that we're going to talk about. It's our second one that we're going to talk about today. And it has to do with you having some kind of connection with somebody, some kind of intellectual connection, some kind of like bonding with somebody, some kind of similar to like a friendship or in romantic relationships, but you have like some kind of connections, which definitely falls into line with the main character of this film, played by Eddie Murphy, and the partner that he ends up with, someone who he is seeking. He's seeking somebody who is his mental equal, somebody who he can talk to, somebody who he can be a teammate with, and be able to go back and forth with. Three is storge. Storge is usually like a devoted love, kind of like a parent-child love, maybe a teacher-student love. It's a devotion, some kind of like, there's a security, right? You're thankful to that person, right? Just depends how you want to, I can interpret in different types of relationships for sure. Four is pragma, which is the hardest love to attain. It's a mature love. It's an enduring love. It's a love that involves dedication, selfishness, devotion, discipline. It's a love that you work towards. You have to harvest. Pragma is, like I said, the hardest one to attain. So, yeah, it's probably the biggest test of any relationship or any friendship in general, because it's what usually makes or breaks partners, which is something that you can decide if the characters did have a pragma like love, which there is a sequel, so you'd probably say yeah, but it's arguably probably the hardest one to define. But if you've been in a long-term relationship, you probably understand it. Fifth one is ludus. Ludus is like a playful love. It's like a flirtatious love. It has to do with like all those like kind of interactions. It's also associated almost like to like a playfulness, kind of something that you feel like when you're drinking, you're having fun, hanging out with like music and stuff. So ludus can play a role with other forms of love for sure. It can be accompanied by other ones, right? Because depending on your relationship, you could have a very playful relationship, right? Or it could be maybe casual encounters could also apply to casual sex as well. The next form of love that we're going to talk about is mania. And mania is an obsessive love and a love that kind of overpowers you, right? There is a mental instability aspect associated with mania. Of course there is, right? Mostly anything that you see that's like negatively associated with love, or people that have some kind of mental ailment that you would probably associate with mania. But on the other side of it, mania is actually probably healthy in the beginning of the relationship, right? It's new, it's fresh, it's different. This person intrigues you. You have this connection with them, right? Or maybe you're like super fascinated or interested in this particular type of person or concept or thing that you're researching. That could be like another form of mania, but kind of in a healthy way. So it could be like the beginning of like a discovery, would be one way of interpreting it. Another one is Meraki, which is more of a modern Greek word. It comes from the Turkish word merak, and it has to do with like the creative process. When you create something, when you do something like from your heart, when you give something some kind of complete delivery, when you're giving it something from like pure intentions with like an unselfishness, like something that you do when you're creating a song, when you're singing, when you're cooking, when you're trying to do something of love to somebody. It's almost like an action, right? So that's where Meraki plays a role, right? So like when you cook for somebody, right? That's a form of you having Meraki. Philatia or philasia is a form of self-love. Aristotle says it's the most important love. It's the only way you can love others is if you love yourself. Some would say it would probably be the hardest love because it's an endless path, right? Because we change, we grow as people. And even if we feel like we stay the same, to love each other or to love ourselves while we're trying to remain the same, while everything else challenges us, it's not always easy. Of course it's not. When things are trying to pull us in different directions and we lose who our sense of self is. And when we don't love ourselves, dangerous things can potentially happen and we potentially hurt ourselves and we hurt other people around us. The final form of love is agape or agape. Apologize if I'm saying that wrong. It's unconditional love. It's like when you do love and you don't require anything back in return. It's like a form of charity, altruism, like an unselfish act. When you're just doing something from just the pureness of your heart, just because you want to help, just because you want to show your love, and just by showing you got a big old heart. Those are the 9 different types of love according to the Greeks. Hopefully you guys got some value from that. And I hope this little deep dive about this love film is going to help you see things a little differently. Now comes to my review. As far as my thoughts and review of the film isn't a perfect film by any means. It definitely has some cheap jokes. And I'm not a fan of how they treat the younger sister in it, of course, for some cheap laughs. And but overall, like, the story is an endearing love story. It does a decent job of hitting all those different bases, and there's a lot of heart to this story, and there's a lot of rawness and realness. As I stated before, there's a lot of real and rawness about the immigrant story, about the love story. So I would probably have to give this film a 7. It's a good film. It's a comedy classic, and definitely an important story. It's an important story for African American films, for Black films, and for the overall culture. The cast was great. And, the costume design, the set designs, the details, the music, the different lessons and the different things that you can take from the film, as well as like the nods to different things in pop culture. The film does a good job in some of those areas. It is a little clunky how we get to the finale, but overall, it's still an enjoyable film. Thank you guys for watching another AZ Ray video. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Take it easy, guys.